Parsons is pleased to introduce P3 2018 keynote speaker, Pierre Lavallée, President and CEO of Canadian Infrastructure Bank. For more than 70 years, Parsons has been known for our unparalleled expertise in designing and constructing commercial and government infrastructure. Parsons has stayed on top by pushing cutting-edge and innovative solutions to the industry. We are currently delivering a number of P3 projects across Canada, including the Eglinton Crosstown here in Toronto, the Regina Bypass, and the Southwest Calgary Ring Road. As we all know, today's economy is a digitally connected, globally competitive, rapidly evolving marketplace that is in need of constant, ever more innovative solutions. As the inaugural CEO and President of the Canadian Infrastructure Bank, Pierre Lavallée is responsible for enabling innovative investments for transformational infrastructure projects. The bank has $35 billion available to partner with private investors and provinces, territories, municipalities, and Indigenous communities to build much more needed infrastructure. In August, the bank made its first investment, providing approximately $1.3 billion towards the Rousseau Express Metropolitan Project in Montreal. Before his appointment to the bank, Pierre served as Senior Managing Director and Global Head of Investment Partnerships at Canada Pension Plan Investment Board. Please join me in welcoming Pierre Lavallée to the stage.
Bonjour, good afternoon, and thank you, Amardeep, for the kind introduction. And thank you all for giving me the opportunity to discuss with you the progress that we are making in building the Canada Infrastructure Bank. Over the last 4 months, I've had the opportunity to meet many of you individually, and it's been gratifying to feel such enthusiasm for the potential opportunity that we all have to build more great infrastructure for Canadians. In the process, we also have the opportunity to create a great new Canadian institutions that others around the world will seek to emulate. As the Minister said yesterday, we have a lot to be proud of in the development of the Canadian P3 model over the last 20+ years. Canada is a global leader in P3, and I strongly believe that we must pursue new ideas and new approaches, innovations, as Amardeep described them, if we want to stay ahead. Last year at this conference, you heard our board chair and also the person who will check whether I'm performing appropriately, according to Mark, Janice Fukakusa, described last year the governance and the mandate for the bank. At the time, she was actually in the middle of forming an outstanding board of directors, which was selected after a thorough assessment process that led to the director's appointment in late November 2017. With solid professional credentials and deep experience in a variety of infrastructure and investment areas, our diverse pan-Canadian board is well equipped to deliver on its governance mandate, including the approval of our investments. Among other duties, the board recommended my appointment as CEO, which became effective in mid-June. Since then, it's been a real whirlwind of activity as we moved into full startup mode. Our activities have varied greatly from day to day. We've moved from temporary office space to our permanent office. We've met provincial and territorial ministers of infrastructure to launch our dialogue on future infrastructure priorities. And we've met with both Canadian and international investors to discuss opportunities to invest in Canada. But I'm getting ahead of myself. The bank's mandate is to invest $35 billion of capital alongside private investors in new revenue-generating infrastructure built in the public interest, where significant usage risk is transferred to private investors. It's worth spending a bit of time on a few of the main points here. The $35 billion may be invested anywhere in the capital structure of a project. Fundamentally, we're looking to fill the gap that prevents a project from seeing the light of day or from being structured in a way to best attract private sector capital and risk transfer. We know that that could come in various forms of equity or fixed income, with plenty of structuring to ensure that an appropriate allocation of risks and returns among co-investment partners. Over the last 6 years, through my participation on investment committees at CPP Investment Board, I witnessed firsthand the hard-fought competition for mature infrastructure assets that have transacted at ever-increasing multiples. The list of potential investors is lengthened, and the fund commitments have also substantially increased. There is a supply shortage of good quality infrastructure assets to invest in, and I think that we can change that. We've seen this movie before in real estate. As institutional investors piled in, cap rates compressed, and investors in mature assets expanded their scope to include more development and ultimately full redevelopment and greenfield investments. As this dynamic's been playing out in infrastructure, we've seen investors' interest broaden to take on more development risk, albeit in a measured and progressive way. We believe that there's a real appetite to invest in new infrastructure projects with a reasonable risk-reward equation for private and institutional investors. Since June, I've heard this many times already from institutional investors who've traditionally shied away from greenfield projects. The revenue generation component that is embedded in this outline is important to the financial structure, as investors will get their returns from usage-generated fees, which could take the form of tolls, shadow tolls, fees, fares, tariffs, and mechanisms based on appreciating land values. In essence, we're looking for projects that will transfer significant usage risk to the private investors. Our mandate also covers the codification and dissemination of global best practices, the creation of an inventory of Canadian infrastructure projects, and the synthesis of data and information to support better evidence-based decisions. We have no fixed allocations by sector for our $35 billion, but our goal is to invest at least $5 billion in each of our three priority sectors, which are green infrastructure, public transit, and transport and trade. We can also invest in other areas of infrastructure if they're supported by government policy, so we have a fair bit of flexibility. As we deploy capital across these sectors and broader infrastructure projects, we will seek to build on and complement the existing P3 market. The bank was created to address a gap in the market that sits between traditional government-funded infrastructure, whether that's traditional procurement or P3s, and projects that are privately funded. We're meant to fit in the middle of the two. By transferring usage, will that work? Here we go. By transferring operational usage and revenue risks from government to the private sector, we will grow the requirement for both debt and equity investments compared to the various forms of traditional P3s. Although this slide is illustrative, we are purposely highlighting that private capital is meant to be a multiple of the bank's investment on the far right. It is also possible that some government financing from provincial, territorial, municipal, and Indigenous levels remains part of the equation, confirming that the projects are aligned with these governments' priorities. By convening this additional capital and by injecting our own where needed, we will reduce the need for government financing overall. As a result, governments can shift scarce resources to other priorities where revenues are insufficient or don't exist at all. This is why we strongly believe that our investments will add to the pool of infrastructure for Canadians and will create new investment opportunities for the private sector. Let me give you a bit more detail on what we're looking for as we evaluate each project. We're looking for transformative projects. We have the means to make large investments. We're also seeking to convene a multiple of our investment from private sources, so in aggregate, we're looking to have a material impact. Each project must pass a public interest test to ensure the project is well aligned with the relevant government priorities and policies, that it contributes to economic growth, and that it contributes to sustainability. The project's sustainability includes both environmental considerations and the notion that in its very structure, the project will provide self-renewing infrastructure to Canadians. By thinking in terms of life cycle costs, we can deliver better infrastructure that lasts longer. Our first round of project analysis also addresses three sets of questions. Is the project bankable? Will there be sufficient revenue streams broadly defined to fund the project through its life cycle? 2, how will the sponsors go to market with the project? How will investors, proponents, and bidders be approached, and with what? And third, given that some projects may affect other existing privately financed infrastructure, how will we ensure that our investment will not distort the market? Can we invest in a project while maintaining a level playing field? I will now contrast a few things that we're looking for with what we're looking to avoid. We're looking to finance project, not to provide recurring funding nor ongoing operating cost subsidy. We're not looking to take all of the risk. We may accept more risk than our expected returns would warrant, but let's be clear, we're looking for the private capital to bear significant risks. Of course, we expect our partners to earn reasonable returns for the risks that they shoulder. We will structure our investments to support a strong alignment with our partners. We're certainly not looking to crowd out private investment with our cheap capital. In fact, we're looking to do exactly the reverse, which is to crowd in private investments and convene capital from both domestic and international investors. So we're quite clear about the markers of what is and what is not a CIB investment. But we remain very flexible in how to invest our capital for the benefit of the project. We're in the business of custom financing solutions. Within the overall capital structure parameters, where private capital is a multiple of our investment, we're as flexible as it relates to the detailed capital structure itself and what security we will hold and for how long. We have some leeway on the risk-return equation that allows us to earn lower returns than what would be expected commercially for the amount of risk that we're taking. We can also design terms that provide the project with the necessary flexibility to come to life, so long as there's a strong alignment with the partners. As we seek to find and help define investment opportunities, we're actively engaging with the market, and as our staff continues to grow, we will continue to ramp up our outreach efforts. We are reaching out to both public and private sponsors, and we've been pleasantly surprised by the large number of inbounds from the private sector. Keep them coming. With our public partners, we engage on a number of topics as listed here, all of which aim to grow the number of projects and opportunities. And as these meetings take place, we're developing some early thoughts on 3 fronts with respect to project structuring and investments. Now, a bit of a user warning. These are not fully baked, but we want to give you a preview of the types of ideas that we're developing. We've had a number of discussions with private sponsors to discuss their ideas for unsolicited proposals and for new approaches to tackling well-known infrastructure gaps. There is clearly a lot of potential to be unleashed with a well-structured unsolicited proposal process, which could be adopted by various governments for a wide variety of potential projects. For the process to function well, it'll be important to ensure that there is appropriate market testing to ensure proposals are competitive, while respecting the proprietary work that some sponsors have already developed. We're also working on that second concept of a backstop commitment to procuring agencies. This would provide governments with greater confidence to allow the private sector to innovate and accept greater risk transfer, including revenue and usage risks, without threatening a failed procurement or an unviable project. The backstop concept would allow us to flex the size of our commitment through a competitive process, allowing us to reduce our investment size if there is a greater private sector risk appetite than originally anticipated. This structure allows more projects to come to market with greater opportunities for innovation and risk transfer. Our discussions with private sponsors suggest that you are eager to work closely with CIB to deploy capital efficiently, including, for example, under the competitive process described before, where CIB may tree with various proponents to design customized solution for various bidders, rather than providing one uniform stapled CIB package. Third, We're working on the concept of standardized investment terms and conditions, which may come in a number of varieties, but with the common trait that they will allow the CIB to support individual projects which are too small to efficiently attract private capital. But when bundled or aggregated with CIB support, they may attract the attention of investors. So we welcome your input on these three ideas, and we will also consider other novel ideas, and I encourage you to bring them to us. As you all know, Nick Hahn, where is Nick? Somewhere in this room. He promised he'd be here to support me. Nick Hahn's joined us on October 1st as our head of investments, and he and his team are deeply engaged in structuring support for a number of projects we expect will come to market in the coming year. We've jumped into our investment mandate with both feet. We've had over 120 outreach meetings in the last 6 months. We've already had discussions on over 55 specific projects, more than half of which are unsolicited proposals. If you have a good project, let's talk. Of these 55, relatively few are off mandate, so our addressable market is considerable. Most of them are continuing their early gestation period, so these are not all necessarily ready for investment, but they continue to gestate, and we will continue to help develop these projects into real opportunities. Our team is currently actively engaged in 10 different projects that we're reviewing for investment. And of course, under the leadership of our then interim CIO, Bruno Guillemette, we closed our first transaction, a $1.28 billion investment in Réseau Express Métropolitain, or REM. REM will deliver a major improvement in Montreal's urban transit services, and it's a good example of bringing in significant private capital into a transformative project. REM is also a good example of what CIB seeks to deliver, which is a custom solution for each project that meets our mandate. Through extensive discussions and due diligence work over a 5-month period, our team, the Quebec government, and CDPQ agreed that a 15-year loan with interest escalating from 1% to 3% was the most appropriate role for us to play. That was not the starting point, as Robert would tell you. It supports the project through its early stage, but 15 years from now, we fully expect that the REM will refinance itself in the private markets and repay our loan. We can then redeploy that capital to another project. REM clearly meets our mandate in terms of sector focus in urban transit and has been a clear government priority. As we announced just a few minutes ago, François Lecavalier will join us in early December as head of project development. His key role will be to engage with public sector sponsors to understand each level of government's priorities and to turn ideas into projects. François and his team are also responsible to develop, deliver, and manage the inventory of Canadian infrastructure projects. The inventory will be built to meet 2 objectives. Firstly, to promote infrastructure opportunities to both domestic and international players who may be investors or service providers. We think that there is value to promoting projects even if they're not necessarily bankable by CIB. Secondly, the inventory will foster collaboration across the infrastructure ecosystem, share best practices, and coordinate efforts where it makes sense. The inventory will be accessible online, and we will be seeking inputs from both public and private sector proponents, but we will curate the information to ensure consistency. We're currently reviewing other project pipelines, including, for example, the GI hubs, with whom we've already been in discussion and who've had a global pipeline already in operation for several years. The inventory will be a core tool for long-term planning and the development of our own investment funnel. We've made significant progress over the last few months, and we're poised to accelerate over the coming months. I can tell you, with a month behind us and Nick and I working together, we are accelerating. Over the next few weeks, we will revamp our website to include a clearer description of our investment process, our criteria, and submission requirements. By January, our full executive team will be in place, and we're actively building the teams that will report to them. Together, we are setting out to build more infrastructure for Canadians and more opportunities for all of you to continue to build the best infrastructure market in the world. With your support and ingenuity, we will see more large-scale transformative projects, more government demand for private investments in infrastructure, a sophisticated unsolicited proposal process, more revenue usage and operating risks transferred, which will result in more equity and debt investment opportunities in infrastructure. Together, we can make the bank an example of innovation that others around the world will seek to emulate. Lastly, I'd like to thank you, many of you, for the warm welcome that you've given me so far in this job. I also want to thank you in advance for your ongoing support, your creativity to make our country an even better place to live in and to do business in. At this point, questions have already started to pop up, so I guess we need to shift gears to answer some questions. Mark, come and help me.
Great. Let's get on with that then. So, this is a long one, this first one, right? We can read it together. So what are some of the new infrastructure projects you wish were more advanced in their planning to be ready for the finance and procurement stages? And would the bank support planning work to accelerate their readiness?
So do we wish there are more advanced projects? Absolutely. We're here to get stuff done and to move things forward. That being said, better to make good investments than just fast investments. So I think we are ready and willing to engage in projects that are ready for prime time. But we also will take the time to conduct appropriate due diligence and so on. Is there one sector? We are open and we're thinking very broadly about the sectors, about the various projects and subsectors within those subsectors within those sectors. And we're willing to engage in any of those areas or all of those areas simultaneously. We don't have a favorite child yet.
Great. What lessons learned has the CIB taken on board from other international infrastructure banks when planning your own activities?
I think there are, this bank we're trying to create, we think is unique. It's unique in the combination of tools and flexibility that we've been given. That being said, we are consulting with other organizations to understand their governance, their investment process, their due diligence processes, their unsolicited proposal process, all of that. We are trying to understand as much as we can, and of course always with a critical eye, not a negative critical eye, but a critical eye to understand what may be transposed into the Canadian context and what may not work in the Canadian context. So we will come up with, I think, a unique approach that is as well tailored to the Canadian context as possible.
That's a good answer. I think that's it for the questions.
That's it.
Remarkable, isn't it?
Very good.
Yeah, that's because people want to get you one-on-one as you walk out of the room.
If there are any more, I had one more slide, but I don't control this anymore. I'm just messing.
You're done, man.
Anyway, we have potentially the longest email address of any organization. So mine is Pierre Lavallée at canadainfrastructurebank.ca. Try to type that on your BlackBerry, for those of you who still have BlackBerry. We now have a shorter one, which is you can send any questions, comments, good ideas to investments or investissement at cib-bic.ca. Much easier to remember. Thank you very much. We look forward to hearing from you.